Welcome back to Bahamas at Sunrise. Friday past, we were talking with the president of the Bahamas Historical Society, and she announced that today, Monday night, they will be hosting a lecture series, and the topic is entitled The Saltwater Underground Railroad. So very pleased to be joined on Bahamas at Sunrise by my cousin. I just found that out. Family, right?
Family.
Moss from the Crooked Island, Acklands
right.
area. All right. He is Professor Stefan Moss, Georgia State University. Welcome back.
Here,
welcome
Thank
home.
you. Good to be
Welcome
home,
home.
man, always.
A good old, was it NCA, SAC,
Yeah, COB, welcome.
COB. We got all of that in common.
Right.
But we were so fascinated on Friday when Andrew was talking about this lecture series and this particular topic for July. Another one is in August. But the Saltwater Underground Railroad. We're familiar with the Underground Railroad.
Right.
But you've taken it to another level. I mean, in a nutshell, what exactly is it?
The Saltwater Underground Railroad is kind of that movement south into Spanish Florida in the early beginnings, and then eventually to the Bahamas, where runaway enslaved Africans from plantations in Georgia and South Carolina were looking for freedom. And so there's lots of work that's already been done by recognized Bahamian scholars like Dr. Tinker. There's also a lady in Florida, Dr. Rosalind Howard, also Dr. Rita Pratt. She runs the museum here. And so basically standing on the shoulders of those giants, I decided to put together a virtual tour. And so the virtual tour documents many of the most important sites along the Saltwater Underground Railroad where those enslaved Africans were migrating south into Spanish Florida, which at the time was kind of a sanctuary. And then eventually also many of them traveled to the Bahamas, settling in Andros and in New Providence.
I mean, that's an interesting story. I mean, when you say many of them, you're talking about
Thousands. Yeah, thousands.
Okay.
Yeah.
And maybe the Bahamas wasn't the last stop, I'd imagine, throughout the Caribbean as well.
There were other places where enslaved Africans ended up. Trinidad, for example, the Americans, if you look at that community there, you can trace them back to kind of that migration as well. So there's lots of really cool, heroic stories. Mexico, blacks free, looking for opportunities for freedom. Many of them also escaped into Mexico. So.
But in the islands of the Bahamas in particular, which ones were probably the most prominent ones that they settled in?
Well, you have the Red Base community, which is,
sure.
Most people know about the Black Seminole history there and how they traveled in those dugout canoes. That's a very, very powerful story. And those communities, that community is still there today. So it's kind of a testimony to resilience and the strength of that movement. But also here in New Providence, there were lots of vessels that were, at the time, loaded with enslaved Africans. And when the British abolished the slave trade, they were basically taking those ships, and many of them ended up here in Nassau. So you have the communities of Gambia and Adelaide and some other communities, and it's a rich and fascinating story.
Well, I mean, take us a little bit through it's a digital tour, of course.
It's a digital tour. It is.
Just describe what we'll.
Sure.
Don't give all of it out because we definitely want him to come out tonight.
Sure,
but
absolutely.
in a nutshell, I mean, just some actual tour itself.
Well, the tour starts in Georgia. I'm currently living there, and so I wanted to kind of give people a taste of what a traditional plantation would look like. So there are plantations in the Georgia area that are, very much look like what they would have looked like back in the 1800s. Through South Carolina, into sites in Savannah, parts of Florida. And really, man, trying to retrace, those steps using Google Earth, which is a powerful tool. So it's more of a kind of a technology, kind of a STEM / history mashup, where you get to use a tech tool to learn about Black history, which is really cool.
I mean, you say it's really cool, but it's also very important, really critical. I mean, especially in today's environment. I mean, the conversation, I think, is as important today as it was even 60 years ago.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
So what drew you to this aspect of history?
Thanks for asking, man. When I moved to the United States, I didn't know a whole lot about, our connection as Bahamians to this larger story. And I got involved in a group called Outdoor Afro, and I was a part of a movement that was taking, people outside and learning about the outdoors and reconnecting people to the outdoors. And I started visiting these national park sites. And through those national park sites, I started realizing that there was so much history there, Black history in U.S. national parks that related to where I'm from. So it just sparked my interest. I just kept reading, kept learning, kept studying. And I came upon, obviously, the tremendous work of some of the Bahamian scholars. I'm a scientist by training, but it was just so amazing to hear these stories that relate to the land and relate to our place in nature, and how people like Harriet Tubman and many other individuals were so powerful in the outdoors, helping to free people. So it's a very, very interesting thing.
I mean, that is fascinating. I mean, we talk a lot about the identity of people. I mean, obviously, I mean, if you're of this hue, you would have been brought here.
Sure, absolutely.
And so we're all kind of related in some regard or another. What would you like for young Bahamians in particular most to get out of this particular
experience?
Yeah.
Well, with the virtual tour, man, I just want them to hear these stories, man. The stories are so powerful, so empowering. And, as a young Bahamian growing up, I didn't have access to these stories. So I definitely want to kind of introduce or reintroduce these stories. I'm not sure, how much of these stories are being taught in Bahamian classrooms or how much exposure students have. So in my mind, I just say, hey, look, here's an online platform, a virtual tour. You don't have to physically hop on a plane and go.
Right.
The power of Google Earth is that you can essentially be there without being there. And so it was just a way, I think, for young Bahamians and anybody really to be able to connect to these stories and feel empowered, knowing that as a Bahamian, you are also a part of this larger story of freedom, which what everyone's searching for.
Is this your first real work like this, or do you have other tours that you developed?
This is my first one, man. There was a time about 1.5 years ago, man, where this is all I did. I ate, slept, and drank this, and I wasn't sure exactly what the outcome would be. I just knew that here's this powerful tool I can use to tell a story. And I just felt like everyone should know about these individuals, these people who created such an amazing storyline that I want people to follow.
Well, I tell you what, continue to write, continue to tell those stories. I think they're very important, actually. So tonight it's at the Bahamas Historical Society. I think she said it begins at 6 p.m.
6:15, yeah.
6:15, okay.
We'll be there, man.
Right there on Shirley Street.
Yeah.
Okay, listen, Stefan Moss.
Thank you,
didn't
man.
want me to call him doctor, so professor. Georgia State University. Welcome home, man.
Thank you,
so
man.
much.
Good to be here.
All right, you're watching Bahamas at Sunrise. We'll be right back.